Oh, I was sent down from Washington, D.C. to see about these murders.
See, what about him?
See who's doing it.
That's a scene from Martin Scorsese's much-anticipated Killers of the Flower Moon, a film based on a book chronicling the murders and suspicious deaths of Native Americans in Osage County, Oklahoma, more than a century ago. And while the FBI investigated the crimes leading to the conviction of 3 people, it was an investigation that barely scratched the surface, a conspiracy that has been forgotten through the years. Many hope not any longer. On the vast prairie lands of Oklahoma's Osage Nation, a reckoning is underway.
Anna, Rita, here's Minnie.
Resurrecting survival stories.
And there's Molly.
That live in descendants like Margie Burkhart.
I have lived with the Reign of Terror all my life, ever since I was too young to remember. My mother and my father would be sitting at the kitchen table. They talked about all the other Osage murders, how Ernest deceived Molly.
Deception, greed, and racism.
You want to go to Washington, D.C.?
This may be the last thing I do.
In a tale brought to the big screen, with Margie's grandmother and grandfather portrayed by Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone taking center stage.
And kill these men who killed my family.
Molly Burkhart survived a murderous plot by her husband, Ernest, in a scheme to inherit oil and gas rights on her property. The alleged mastermind? His uncle, William K. Hale, as portrayed in the film by Robert De Niro.
These women died with how Osage suffered from illness. You have to make it the head rights come to you.
Greed was what drove all these murders. William Hale, he was one of the richest men in Osage County. He didn't need any more money.
Here you see Anna. She was the first one that got murdered.
Hale was rumored to be behind several murders, but only convicted in the case of Henry Roan.
His murder led the FBI to find the killers and prosecute those that ordered the killing and actually did the killing.
Jim Gray is Roan's great-grandson and a former Osage tribal chief. Just to go to trial, he says, required a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court.
The U.S. attorneys had to fight very hard. At the time, they did not think it was possible that an all-white jury would convict a white man for killing an Indian.
But this case was just the tip of the iceberg. 24 deaths were under investigation.
I'm sorry for all troubles.
People's homes were being blown up. People were taken out in the country getting shot. They were poisoned. Cars were getting driven off the road.
The systematic murder of Osage men, women, even children was made profitable by the policy of guardianship. A 1906 federal act effectively declared the Osage incompetent to manage their own affairs, placing them and their assets, including their land and oil rights, in the custody of white overseers.
Federal policies worked in concert with very bad people to produce the biggest massive transfer of land from indigenous hands to non-indigenous hands.
The irony? The Osage bought millions of acres of what they believed was undesirable land in Oklahoma after being pushed off their territory in farm-rich Kansas.
A collision with Western expansion, the industrialization of the country, World War I. The main ingredient was oil, and it was found on our reservation.
In 1923 alone, the tribe earned $30 million from its oil and gas production, about $400 million today. Per capita, it made the Osage the richest nation in the world.
A story like this is about one of the worst racial injustices and more monstrous crimes in American history.
David Grann authored the book Killers of the Flower Moon. The fact that you have someone like J. Edgar Hoover who fit into this narrative.
Yes, he really didn't want to look into this case.
He didn't?
No, because these crimes were taking place there, it fell to their jurisdiction. But they completely bungle it, and they can't solve the case for years. I still have a fair amount of the Killers of the Flower Moon documents around here.
Grann uncovered something deeper.
an exponentially higher than average Osage mortality rate.
You had doctors who were administering poisons. You had morticians who would be covering up bullet wounds. You had lawmen who were on the take, and you had many others who were complicit in their silence because they were all getting wealthy from these crimes, from this criminal enterprise.
So this is the Tall Chief Theater, and inside here is the only memorial to the Reign of Terror victims.
Dennis McCullough, a retired Washington Post reporter,
that would be Sybil's grandfather.
Wrote about the murders some 30 years ago in a book dedicated to his grandmother called The Deaths of Sybil Bolton.
Her official cause of death was gunshot wound suicide. Started hearing different versions of her death. Some things looked a little fishy.
He says she was yet another victim of the Reign of Terror. Following her death, his grandfather fled the area with his mother in tow.
So he raised my mother to never say anything about the Osage. She was made to feel ashamed of her Indian heritage.
So much so, he says, she suppressed his Native American identity.
I'm finally honest with myself, and I finally erased the lies that were present in my family growing up.
A blessing Margie Burkhart wishes her father had known.
He was my main concern on all of this, just because the way he was treated, and I think this kind of would help maybe, I don't know, reconcile his feelings or validate his feelings or try to make things right.
Please send help. There's murder in Osage, and the police do nothing.
We shouldn't ever forget this story. We should be talking about this for years to come. And that's one of my concerns. After this movie is over in 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, are people going to forget? Hopefully they won't. Hopefully they do.
For so long, the Osage did not speak of this absolute tragedy in their history, and now they're speaking more about it. Think about it. The first murder, her great aunt, happened 3 days before the Tulsa massacre, the race riots in Tulsa with African Americans. People say there were people that were rescued from Tulsa in Osage County country. So when you think about what was taking place at that time, the Osage are like, we are a nation of survivors. There's so much more that we want people to know about us, and hopefully I'll have a chance to tell that part of the story in the coming months.
Amazing, absolutely amazing, Michelle.